at the beginning of the college football season, all the way back in August, thought, hey, if you were to give me 6 teams, be able to pick the 4 that would make the playoff and feel pretty good about it. Well, you had 2 teams, Michigan and Cincinnati. They crashed the party. They were first-time attendees. Neither one of them looked all that great in their games. Michigan really not as much. Cincinnati held tough against Bama in a game that, it was Bama played pretty close to the vest. But the finals were 2 teams that, I think a lot of people expected to be there. Alabama, who is really good and is good every year with Nick Saban, trying to win his 7th title for the Crimson Tide. And then his protege, Kirby Smart, trying to get it done, trying to become the 2nd coach in the Nick Saban coaching tree to find a way to get it done. The first, this year, Jimbo Fisher did it at A&M. After 4 tries, he busted through on the 5th. Kirby Smart, after 4 tries, busted through on his 5th. And so I'm curious to see the numbers. It was a heck of a game. If you're a college football fan and you love it, this is going to be something that's for you. It was great. It was back and forth, a little bit low scoring at times, but the big plays came in the second half when maybe the defenses got worn down, but neither one of these coaches wanted to play to lose it. They wanted to make sure that, hey, I'm going to keep putting opportunities out there for the other guy to make the mistake. I'm going to keep this thing in control, and we're going to find a way to nurse this thing to a victory. Nick Saban playing incredibly cautious. Kirby Smart, they're doing the same, for the most part. That's why you've got, a 9-6 score, at the half. A lot of different storylines, a lot of different ways you could go with this. You got Bryce Young, Heisman Trophy winner, first-year starter, freshman quarterback, redshirt freshman. Then you've got the guy who's the 5th-year senior, who is the man who's out here, who was a transfer coming in. He's a walk-on. He's like the 4th string, 5th string quarterback in Stetson Bennett. One of my friends affectionately calls him the mailman. He's not all that physically imposing. He's not the biggest guy, doesn't have the strongest arm, but you know what? He's been able to get it done in every game but Alabama, because that was the game in the SEC championship where everything was pushed back up onto him. A lot of 3rd and longs. Well, not much changed in this game, but who was going to be able to get it done? And I wrote this week, I'm like, if they try to put this all on Stetson Bennett, it's not going to be him. He's not going to be able to make enough plays against a guy like Bryce Young. You want to make sure it's your defense and your running game against Alabama. And their predominantly offense is driven by Bryce Young. But don't ask Stetson Bennett to do what Bryce Young did. I thought 30 passes or more, he's in trouble. You want to try to probably stay in the sweet spot around 25. So we'll get to those numbers. Thought Bama had Georgia had to be better on 3rd down than they were. They were 3 of 12 in the first meeting. Bama's 50%, 7 of 14. Thought those numbers had to change. Bryce Young did a great job pulling the ball down at times, running the football. Thought he was going to have a big day doing that. Kirby Smart had an answer for it. And so there's all these things that we looked at, potentially could have happened. And it looked like Bama, even after Stetson Bennett made the critical mistake, it looked like it was going to be their game to ultimately win. But I wrote this about Stetson Bennett in one of my pieces for OutKick. Stetson Bennett is a great story, but great stories don't win championships. Great players do. Now, off of that quote, you could ascertain that that's me saying Stetson Bennett isn't a great player. He's a great story. And because of that, he probably won't win a college football national championship. That is what I was implying, but he played great in the second half of this game tonight. They didn't ask him to do a ton, but when his team needed him the most, he stepped up and made some huge plays. 17 to 26, nothing to write home about. They kept it inside the box. Not a ton of passing plays. Put him in a lot of 3rd and long situations, put him in some bad spots, had to escape the pocket, ultimately had the one fumble that, put Bama down inside scoring territory, scoring position, and a great throw by Bryce Young leads to a touchdown, but 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. So he has the 1 turnover. And so because of that, Bryce Young, you say 31 of 53 passes, 323, throws a touchdown, but 2 turnovers, 2 interceptions, critical ones. And the early one that could have been something, he probably intentional grounding. There obviously wasn't a fumble. But kind of gets away with something right there. But Stetson Bennett outplayed Bryce Young for what he was asked to do. He didn't turn the football over. And Bryce Young, the second pick, is the one that ultimately seals up the game for the Georgia Bulldogs, getting their first national championship in 41 years, going back to when Herschel Walker was toting the pill for the Bulldogs. So congratulations to Bulldogs fans. Here's some things we need to look at. Third downs. Georgia, the fact that they won this game is borderline remarkable. They made big plays. Their defense stepped up in big ways. Third down, Georgia was 4 of 12, slightly better than 3 of 12 that they were in the previous game. You know, you go from 25% to 33%. That's an improvement. Bama 9 of 19 on third down, much better in the second half. Not great early on, but it looked like they were beginning to wear down that Georgia defense. And so with that, they had the 2 interceptions. And I think that's what flips it, because usually if you're winning third down, you're staying on the field, you're wearing teams down. And that was to the second point. It was all about the pace of the game. Georgia wanted to slow it down. They didn't want to run a lot of plays. You wanted to make sure that that defense stayed really rested and that they weren't going to be out there, because the more you expose them, number one, they get tired and they're going to get worn down. Number two, the more they're out there, there's the chance for the big play happening. Bama was able to hit a couple. They were able to hit a couple. And so that did happen a little bit, but 56 offensive plays for Georgia. That's probably the window they wanted to be in, 56 to probably 65. Unfortunately, on the other side of that, Bama had 81. And so blows my mind. I didn't think that Bama would be able, or Georgia would be able to win if Bama had 81 plays. You know, in the first game, Bama's on pace with 42 in the first half. They get the big lead and they don't run as many in the second half and they kind of slow it down. But I'm like, if this thing's over 80, if it's in the mid 80s to 90s, they're in trouble. Bama didn't quite hit the mid 80s, but they were over 81 plays. Not a great sign for Georgia. Somehow Georgia came back and won. They made the big plays. Penalties. If you're a Georgia fan, you're probably about ready to pull your hair out. Some of the roughing the quarterbacks, you know, the hands to the face, some of these penalties, you know, the holding on, you know, the kickoff return. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here. I think most of the game was called pretty well from that standpoint. There were some PIs and different things that Bama gave back late, but 10 penalties on Georgia for 70 yards. 70 yards. Not a clean game. Not a clean game by any stretch. Bama, 5 for 42. Much cleaner. So you look at that, thinking, you know, Kirby, you're supposed to get these guys ready to play. You know, you're supposed to play with your emotions, control your emotions, not let your emotions control you. And usually when you're having penalties, it's because guys are so amped up. They're too juiced trying to go make every single play out there. So you've got that. I mean, my goodness. And then there's obviously the pick six, you know, to finish off the game, which closes it out. But got beat up on third downs. Pace and tempo of the game got beat up. Penalties got beat up. Those 3 key areas got beat up, but they won the turnover margin. And I think that ultimately was obviously the pick six sealed it up, but did a good job of making sure that they won the turnover margin and didn't put their defense outside of the one Bennett fumble in bad situations, gave them long fields. Georgia needed some big plays. Couldn't drive the ball consistently against Bama. Bama couldn't really drive the ball consistently against Georgia. Who was going to be able to have some of those game-breaking plays, 25, 30, 60-yard chunks, explosive gains, hopefully home runs, because both of these teams are pretty good in the red zone. Bama just 1 for 4 scoring touchdowns down there. Very un-Bama-like. And Saban relenting and even settling for a field goal on the inside the 5. But Georgia, 2 big plays. Pickens with a 47-yard shot over the top. Huge to have him back. It was a moonshot. It was a great play by him. And then Mitchell with the 40-yarder as well. So some nice big chunk plays there that helped Georgia out. You got Latu having the big one, Latu for Bama with his big 60-yarder as well. So that was really solid. The story, though, as well in this game, outside the big plays, is the big play threat for Bama. Jamison Williams. They're already down John Mechie. Jamison Williams injures his knee, comes down, has a nice big strike over the middle, big gainer. And unfortunately that you see him go to make the cut, you know, it's a 35, 40-yard gain. You see the knee buckle, boom. He goes out. He's in the tent. He's in sweats, comes back out. And he missed basically half of the game. Still the second leading receiver for Bama, to show you his level of importance and what he's able to provide for the Crimson Tide. But it would be disingenuous to say that didn't have an impact on the game. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that that's why Bama lost and Georgia won, because injuries are part of it all. Georgia was missing George Pickens most of the season. Now he came back. Now, but there are guys that were going to be out for both sides, and that was going to be, a real issue that they were going to be battling with. The fact that Bama was down their two top receivers, two guys who are really good players and going to be good players on Sunday. Yeah, that stinks, but it's part of the game. That's what happens. It's less than ideal, but it happens out there. So Jamison Williams goes out, and with that, Bama lost their big play threat, and you felt like they weren't ever going to be able to hit that home run at that point over the top. Brian Robinson, they were working him in the ground game. He had a decent little game running the football. Rushing yards, by the way, Georgia, $140, Bama, 60. Did a phenomenal job of being able to run the football against a good Bama defense. Bama did everything that they could to run it against Georgia. I give Bill O'Brien credit for getting as creative as he did. He tried to wear them down, a lot of lateral running, but that Georgia defense stood strong for 81 plays. And I keep going back to it because being a defensive guy and playing that much, giving up 9 of 19 on third down, having those long drives, having your offense go 4 of 12 on third down, not getting a lot of rest, that wears you down. But Stetson Bennett gave you the lead with 8 minutes to go in the game, tacks on another touchdown, and then ultimately the pick six for good measure. But you have to feel like this if you're a Georgia player. Your quarterback, Stetson Bennett, gave you the lead with 8 minutes. It's a 1-point lead, but it's a lead nonetheless with 8 minutes to go. It's up to you to defend it. And I think they took umbrage to that and, embraced it. What did Georgia do? To Bryce Young, how were they more effective this game? Granted, they gave up, over 300 yards passing, but they did force the 2 interceptions. What were they able to do that changed it up from the first go around? Obviously, not having Jamison Williams, that's going to impact it. You're going to be able to play more aggressive. You don't have to worry about, that deep threat over the top. Some of it was some Bama's receivers had drops. Bryce Young threw a couple dimes in there. He threw some nice balls that got on his receiver's hands, but never got completed. And so he did that, had a great TD pass to take the lead. But here's how Georgia was able to impact him and affect him. Bryce Young was on the run a lot. He's a good athlete. He never actually ran the ball, though. So what Georgia did is they brought pressure a lot of times from the inside. Nakobe Dean being, explosive and fast, using their inside backers to either mug up and attack and fill up the rush lane. Sometimes they'd bring him off the edge, but they were able to stunt, flush him from the pocket, and then they kept a spy. In the first game, they played a lot of man-to-man coverage. And with that, you get your defensive backs and your linebackers, they're turning their back to the quarterback. As soon as he breaks through the rush lanes, there's going to be places for him to scramble and pick up big yards. And he did it, 40 yards on 3 carries in the first game. This game, Kirby Smart got a little smarter, said, what beat us? How did they get over 100 yards rushing? It wasn't Brian Robinson. It wasn't the Bama rushing attack. It was the fact that their quarterback picked up 40 yards in some big gains on third down and some explosive ones that kind of broke your back. So we're going to spy him. We're not just going to rush 4, even though we have a really talented defensive line. If you rush 5, you fill up the rush lanes. You eliminate the gaps for the quarterback to scramble out of. Good move by Kirby Smart. Did a fantastic job. Played more zone, more eyes back. And when they did play man, a lot of it was in blitzing. And so they made sure that they were bringing an extra guy. Now, if they got out, they'd been in trouble, but they did a good job of flushing him, not letting him scramble downhill and having a straight player with speed. You saw guys, Nakobe Dean, Nolan Smith like that, running him down fairly regularly. Did a really fantastic job of that. So a good game plan, because that was one of my keys. I thought coming into this game, it's like Bryce Young ran for 40 yards. Like that's how these plays will break down. He'll be able to pull it down against this Georgia defense. When they get tired, getting in, a scramble situation, he'll be able to run it and just gash them. Didn't happen. Good job, Kirby Smart. Check that box. Both of these teams in the red zone played really, really well. Defensively, Alabama was 1 for 4 for touchdowns. I was surprised that Saban laid up there inside the 5. You know, you had a chance to score a touchdown. Young gets a little pressure, misses the 7 route. I thought, okay, you know, you go for it, you don't get it. It's not the end of the world. Georgia's backed up. You ultimately kick the field goal, and Bama ultimately ended up taking the lead. Also getting a field goal blocked. You know, the 3 points, 22-19-18 feels a little different than 19-18. Like I said, Stetson Bennett ultimately leads them down and they get a score. So it would have been a moot point anyway. But just Saban has been a lot more aggressive. You know, and he's a Bill Belichick disciple. When you're down in there and you feel like touchdowns can be at a premium, points are at a premium, and you get a chance inside the 5, if you don't score, you feel like your defense is playing well enough, you could get the ball back at the 50 and get a couple first downs, and then a field goal opportunity is almost assuredly yours. So I was just a little bit surprised that Bama and Nick Saban didn't play more aggressive than that. But the tip of the cap in this game, it goes to Stetson Bennett. Georgia's defense was fantastic, but Stetson Bennett was put in some difficult situations. The final drive, you know, to take the lead, he looked really stinking good, really good. And it was wholly impressive with what he was able to put out there on the field. Like I was blown away. I didn't think Stetson Bennett had that in him. There was a couple big passes, gets aided by some pass interference, but you know, Kira to Munkin, they took shots. They were going to be aggressive. They knew Bama was going to be up on them, and they were expecting the quick game and a lot. They had some play action sell-its, and they took shots down the field, and Bama couldn't get there with their pressure. Kudos. Georgia getting it done. First championship in 41 years. So congrats to the Bulldogs for being able to win that and being your 2021, 2022 national champion for the 2021 season. Hats off, Bulldogs, for being able to get that done.